In this video, I'll explain how to work with grids in Adobe InDesign CC 2015. Okay, so we have a page set up here, and you can see that we have our basic square guide around the edges of the page. But up here under View and under Grids and Guides, you can see that we have some options here for grid. We have Show Baseline Grid, and I'm not really going to discuss that except to say that that pertains to working with text, and it creates sort of rules on the page for lining up text. But Document Grid is the grid that you set up that's going to allow us to see everything in sort of a grid layout. I'll go ahead and click it to show you. Now notice how a grid appears. I'll zoom in a bit so we get a better look. And the grid is very fine, but the point of the grid is being able to draw things in relation to measurements and sort of lining things up. So for instance, I'll go ahead and click and draw here. Now, notice how this isn't aligned with the grid at all. I'll zoom in even more. And you can see that here's the upper edge of this particular grid portion, and the rectangle obviously isn't filling that. But if you go back to View, Grids and Guides, there's an option here to snap to the document grid. I'll go ahead and select that. Now, when I choose Snap to Grid, if I click on this object and try to move it or reshape it, then I'm going to feel things snap right into place on that grid. And you can actually see it snap into place too. And let's go ahead and resize it again. There's sort of a major grid line right there to create that grid right there. So the ability to use the grid is really important in an application like InDesign. Keep in mind that the grid is non-printing. It's just there for your edification and allows you to either design things and just see how they place in terms of the grid, or actually choose to turn on Snap to Grid so you can actually snap things into place. Now, if you need to, you can go to Edit and Preferences and locate grids right there. And here we can change the grid. So for instance, I can go ahead and change the color of it if I want to, where it starts, what it's relative to, so it'll either be the top of the page or the top margin, and then your grid increments. So right now it's every 12 points. Now keep in mind that a point is 1/72 of an inch, so 72 points are an inch. And I'm going to make that grid coarser. I'm going to change that to 24 points. And then the view threshold, so you can just change the way that grid is viewed. I'll go ahead and maybe change that to 100%. What the color of the grid is. Now, I like to change the color of the grid because light gray is not bad, but for instance, something like maybe a cyan. And then here we have the horizontal and vertical grid line settings. So we can choose where every grid line occurs. And that's major grid lines. So there's one right now every inch for both the horizontal and vertical. And then you can choose the number of subdivisions, eighths of an inch, which is something that's pretty standard when you're working with something that you're going to send for commercial offset printing. As a matter of fact, pretty much any design, you're going to need at least eighths of an inch. But just for fun, just to show you how this works, I'll change the horizontal and vertical subdivisions to 4. And before I go ahead and press OK, I just want to explain this part right here, grids in back. So all this means is that right now when you design your InDesign document, when you're creating it, and you put something down, whether it be a picture or some sort of object, that the grid lines are going to appear behind that object. You can choose to uncheck that and bring the grid to the front. Now again, grids are non-printing, so it's not going to make any difference. But if for some reason you want to have those grid lines in front, if the grid's important enough to you, you can choose to uncheck that so the grid is in front of the objects. So I'll go ahead and click on OK, and look how our grid has changed now. Now the object that we drew is still perfectly within the grid constraints because remember we changed that from eighths of an inch to quarters of an inch, and so therefore that's fine. But now when I try to resize this object, I'm going to have a coarser experience because as I get close to this grid line right here and right here, notice how it snaps into place. So grids are an important part of working with an application like InDesign. They're pretty easy to work with. You can turn them on and off as needed. And remember, if you want to use that grid for practical purposes, meaning you want to snap things into place, just make sure you turn that feature on under the View, Grids and Guides drop-down menu.